So we have an amazing panel today. When I asked the speakers to come, they always said yes, and I was like, okay, perfect, we can just do it. So we have Abiola. Abiola, you're working full-time actually in professional services. We met a few months ago at bloggers dinners that you organized. That was super fun. So I realized actually she has a side hustle that's pretty big. So she's running a blog called The Active Budgeter. So I'll send you all the resources after the event. So she's going to be our personal finance specialist, talking about pensions and how to really manage your finances. We have Anna Codrea-Rado, so you're a journalist, you're a writer, but you're also running your own business, FG & Co, and your big mission is to help freelance journalists to make the most of their money, to get richer. So you're running also a lot of events, you have a weekly newsletter, so same, I'll send you all the resources. And Safaya, you're the founder of The Coven, you're like a serial entrepreneur and you're helping women, build their own businesses, so creatives, freelancers, and I joined The Coven a few months ago and I love it. So it's an awesome community of witches, so we'll talk about that also. So thank you, ladies. So that was my intro, but it's quite dry, so do you want to tell me a bit more why you're here?
Sure.
Yeah, do you want to start? Yeah.
Why I'm on this panel?
Yeah, why are you here today?
I've been asking myself the same question. I guess because as someone running a business, when you run a business, you need to be in control of your finances and you have to have some kind of idea what you're doing with your money so that your business lasts. And I don't think money's one of those things, as you know, that nobody wants to talk about. And it's one of the things that within my community and further afield, just my audience in general, I'm trying to get them talking about more, is how to work with their money and how to not be ashamed to talk about their money. Like, it's okay to not understand how to manage your money and to have to learn. I think everybody comes into business feeling a little bit awkward about it, like, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know what kind of spreadsheets I'm supposed to be doing, I don't know if I should have an accountant. That's totally normal, and I want to help people feel safe to talk about that and learn, because unless you talk about it, you're not going to learn it.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome.
So my whole mission with FJ & Co, which is the community that I run, is to show freelance journalists that they can make a sustainable self-employed living. And I've started with journalists, but this really, really is applicable to all freelancers. But I truly believe that freelancing has, the barriers to freelancing are now so low that it has enabled anyone to go out and pursue a career in whatever field they want, especially in the creative industry, so that's really important. And when we look particularly at journalism, it's a very elitist, closed industry, and freelancing is one way that we can really open up access to it. But the mechanisms by which freelancers get paid makes it really, really, really hard to just to exist as a freelancer, basically. So I have a campaign around fair pay for freelancers, and that's all about basically just paying freelancers fairer, better and faster, and kind of changing the whole culture and also the regulations around how freelancers get paid. I feel really, really passionately that freelancing for the right people can really, really work. There should be no reason why structurally you can't do it because of kind of the nonsense around how we get paid as freelancers. So that's kind of where I come from in this. And also, as far as with feedback I get from my community and also just in my own experience, the biggest problems freelancers face all come back to money, whether it's getting paid late, whether it's kind of struggling to find the right kind of work, whether it's maternity allowance, pensions, all of this, it all comes back to money. And there are some things that need to change at a kind of macro level, but I think stuff like this is super important to be talking about it amongst our communities, and just kind of figuring out some practical things that we as individual freelancers can do to kind of improve our situation right now.
So good morning, guys. Well done for coming on time. I was just telling the ladies, I love it that everyone's literally early birds this morning. So my name is Abiola. I basically run a platform called Active Budgeter. The main reason why I'm here is because I literally believe and strongly believe that talking about money should not be a serious topic, and it shouldn't be boring. I'm big on making sure there's a community, and obviously this is already a community here, so it's just trying to, again, speak openly about finances, share knowledge, and also use the right tools. So, for example, my platform, I provide certain spreadsheets that basically get you to think about how to forecast for the future and be realistic with what you can do. If you are, for example, in a full-time job and you wanted to go to freelance, it's trying to think, are you ready? And if you are a freelancer, trying to think actually, what can I do with the current money that I'm doing or managing to get to where I need to be? And what if I'm not at that stage, how can I then think of strategies to get me to that ultimate goal? So thank you for the invitation. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. I'm super excited. So today I think we'll do like 3 different discussions. The first one is going to be around women and freelancing, because it's mostly women in the room, and we have very specific issues when it first of all when it comes to employment, but even more when it comes to freelancing. Then we'll talk about knowing our hours, fixing our prices, negotiating our rates, increasing our rates, and we'll finish by practical money management, like the day-to-day accounting and stuff like that. So maybe Sapphire, I'll start with you. So I worked as an employee for 8 years. That was quite easy. I didn't have a pension and stuff, but that's another issue. And then I started freelancing, and it's, for me it was amazing, and now I have a family, I have kids, so that allows me to spend time with them, but at the same time it comes with lots of responsibilities. So what are for you the pros and cons of freelancing for women?
So many pros. I think number one is the flexibility and the freedom. As you've said yourself, you've got family, whether you've got family or not. Obviously, when you're employed, quite often you're working 9 to 5. Some people are getting more flexible and working, but that there's still a long way to go on that. And I think having your own schedule, I know for me that was the biggest draw, was to be able to work to my own schedule, work on it. Because the thing is, when you can work on things outside of work, if you don't have to work a normal 9 to 5, you can really fit around what works for you, whether that's kids, whatever whatever that might be. In terms of cons, you have so much less stability. So it's a risk to start a business. It can be a risk to go freelance. I think it totally depends on what industry you're going into. Some areas you go into freelance and you might be quite guaranteed work. It might also depend on your experience and what you're bringing to the table. So you have to think, you can't be too risk averse. You have to thrive on a little bit on not knowing exactly when the next job is coming in, because it is very hard you won't be able to line up a year's worth of work and be like, well, you might if you were lucky, but the majority of us are going to be like, I'm not really sure what's next after this. Cons, I guess, as well, is it's not stable, your income. When you leave employment, you are saying goodbye to a definite salary. You can definitely you can definitely exceed what you were earning if you really nail it and get to grips with your finances and what you're doing. But definitely in the first few months, year, maybe a couple of years, you probably see a drop in your salary, and you kind of have to be ready for that and willing. It takes work to get back up to that, and it's still never guaranteed. You might still, as a freelancer, have months, and a business owner, where you're like, yeah, shit, I haven't made any money this month. And it happens, especially as you were saying, if people aren't paying you on time, you might have been due a lot of money that month and it might just not come in. So you do have to have that foresight and that pre-planning, I think.
And with the coven, so you lived abroad actually, running your business for quite a while. So how did it work to find clients, build your business? You lived in Ibiza, so
yes.
Pretty cool.
I started the business, for full transparency, in the UK.
Okay.
And because I had run a business before, I had already started to build up sort of a personal network of connections and people, and lots of women that I had met that also run businesses. Most of them were at that point in the wedding industry, because I owned a florist. But I just continued to build it up. So social media is how we've essentially grown. Instagram is where, I think nowadays it sits at about 75% of our work, but in the beginning it was about 98% of my members and prospective clients came via Instagram. Then, I moved after, would have been about a year, the business would have been about, not quite a year old, 3/4 of a year. Time is all merging into one. I moved to Ibiza and ran the business whilst I was working remotely. which was a whole different ball game because you're not in the country when things go wrong, but I do have a team, so it's not just me solely working on the business now, which means when things do go wrong, I've got other people to confide in and to help me. So, yeah.
Okay, cool, thank you. Anna, what are for you, well, you can tell me about the pros, I think we all know the pros, but what are like the things you need to know when you go freelance, or what are the hardest part and the main challenges?
So there are quite... For women, I mean, there are quite a few. I think one of them, I think it does again come back to money, in that we are only really now at a point where the conversation around money, and particularly money around women, is really changing. So it's now becoming a feminist issue to kind of say, I'm a woman, I want to be financially independent, and it's sort of it's okay to say I want to make money, because that's very empowering as a woman. But we don't have the financial education to support how to actually do that. So we were never taught how to manage our money, how to ask for it, how to negotiate. All of these things are not taught for women. And also the workplace kind of has always sidelined women anyway. And unfortunately, we end up bringing those habits into freelancing as well. So whereas a man will very comfortably, kind of using my kind of own industry as an example, a man will very comfortably say, yes, I want £1 a word for that article. A woman will really struggle to be so assertive in that kind of negotiation. So that's kind of one thing that I think is really kind of really big issue. And then, of course, for women who have kids, maternity allowance, which is the benefit that you can get if you have a child when you are self-employed, it just does not compare to what you would get as maternity leave if you worked for a company. So there is a benefit available. Like, if people want me to go into the ins and outs of it, I can, but the bottom line is that it's just not comparable, and you can get something, but it will not be anywhere near what you would have got if you did work for a company. That's a really big thing. I think it's kind of a lot of the same sort of, it kind of all comes back to sort of lack of financial education, and also not that many places to go and find this information. So now there is. So you've got Vestpod, you have the Cover, and you have like what I'm trying to do, all of these places, Active Budgeter, like all of these places. But this is stuff that's kind of only really been popping up is very new, and you have to go out and actually find it. Which again kind of also just ties into the other big thing that a lot of people do struggle with, which is the loneliness and kind of a lack of community, and you have to actively go out and seek that. And that, I mean, that really is a con. That's a con for if that's the sort of person you are. Like, full disclosure, I love working at home, and I'm very happy not being in an office, but lots of people really, really miss being in an office and miss being around people. So that is something also kind of, support and that kind of thing.
Great, thank you. So when we come back to finances, I think one of the things for me was, so not having this regular income is really difficult. At the end of the year, you're responsible to actually pay for your taxes, and that's what most freelancers focus on, is like, will I have enough to pay my taxes? So, but taxes is quite like a short-term saving, and it's like a mandatory saving. But what about all the other things? So, if we don't have like any emergency fund, any money on the side, how can we react? How can we protect yourself? And for me, the big thing is about like long-term savings and pensions, so achieving your financial goals. So maybe, Abiola, you can talk a little bit about that. So how can you make the transition from full-time to freelancer, or if you're today already a freelancer, how can you build like sort of a safety net around you and get organized?
So that's a good question. So for myself, I'm currently a full-time employer, but I currently work for an organisation that allows me to work flexibility and be open about what I do outside of work. So I think that's important, because I think sometimes there can be a perception that if you do a full-time role, it's literally 9 to 5, and you might have to not tell your colleagues or your company what you're doing because you're going to leave. But I think my situation is quite different. I work for a firm that actually is proud to have their employees doing things outside and share it with the network. I guess the question with regards to having a full-time job and having a side hustle, in my case, is just trying to be realistic with what I have in my account, and then thinking about actually in the long term, if I do see my side hustle growing, just going with the flow. But if you are in that situation where you're having a full-time job and you actually want to go for freelancing, is trying to really think actually, am I ready? Because financially, if I ask you guys now, are you happy with what's in your account? So just take 2 seconds to digest that. And do you laugh, do you giggle, or do you just think, oh my gosh, she's asked that question? Because that's the thing that triggers your next step, because you don't want to be put in a situation where you're rushing and then you're mentally stressing yourself when you could have actually planned strategically. So I guess, it's trying to embrace the current situation, really be clear as to where you want to go, and really be honest with yourself about what you can actually do if you want to actually take freelancing. Because the dangerous thing is if you do go freelancing and you actually haven't even got emergency fund or 3 to 6 months worth of your salary saved, similar to what the lovely ladies here was saying, you could be in a situation where you're getting paid late, you might have family, you might have other commitments. So I think it's trying to be aware of your commitments as well and be realistic, but then enjoy the journey. But I just wanted to, make everyone feel, or remind everyone about really thinking about what's in your account and then taking the next step and making a wise decision.
Yeah, thank you. And I think on this, one of the first steps when you become a freelancer, when we all started, you had to set your prices somewhere. I came from banking and I studied freelancing in a very different industry. So for me, that was really hard. I couldn't just divide my salary and stuff. So Sapphire, how did you do it? And how do you advise your entrepreneurs in your community to set their first prices, to increase their prices, and to understand that what you charge is not your self-worth? I think that's a big thing, especially for women, understanding your worth and being like, okay, this is my price and I feel really good about it, and this is what I'm charging.
Okay, so when I started my florist, I had come from working for someone previously, and I had always felt as over-involved apprentice who thought they knew a lot at 19 that they didn't charge enough. And my brain was kind of doing some of the maths and thinking, we could make so much more money if we just charged more. So when I then started working for myself, I was really, really, really keen to charge the right rate. And I think the most important thing to do is take yourself out of it. I think a lot of people start by pricing by looking at themselves and their experience and what they feel they're worth, and that's not really where your pricing should start. Your pricing should fit within your industry. And within what the standard price to charge is, and then you start to look at, okay, if you're a freelancer, you might then be like, right, okay, but I've got additional experience, so actually I'm worth slightly more than that because I'm not a beginner. Or you might want to be like, okay, actually I think I need to be slightly under what the industry average is because I am literally starting out and I have pretty much no experience in this field. It's totally up to you where that lies, but I think what's important is, I think, start high and go lower. So when I started, I only had 2.5 years experience when I started my own business in the industry that I was starting a business in. I was very young. It was just before my 21st birthday. I was very naive, and I still had that sort of young person's ego of thinking that you can sort of do anything. So I charged a really high price. I was the highest charging florist in Essex, and I was probably the least experienced. And it did have to work for that, I did have to really prove to people that I could do that. I didn't also have a portfolio because I wasn't allowed to take that with me from my previous place. So I was basically sat in front of clients saying, yeah, I know this is a lot of money, and I know I can't show you any pictures of my work, but I really want you to pay
trust me.
Please trust me. And luckily they did, but it's about, I think, having the confidence to do it. And remember that your prices aren't fixed. So I think don't get too bogged down in it as well, because that's something that stops people from even starting or making the leap, because they're too scared to put a stamp on it and say, this is my price. You can change your prices. You can go high, and if you think after the 5 months, people really aren't vibing with this, you can drop it. It's easier to drop your prices than it is to put your prices up, so it's worth considering, and that's why I always start high and go low. But being brave and looking at the industry for the bar you're going to set, as opposed to looking inwards, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I think in practice is really, really hard. So I know for Vestpod I started to do corporate talks, and these people always ask me to come for free. And I'm like, yeah. So at the beginning I was always saying yes, and then I was negotiating my own prices, and it was super low. And now I have an agent, and she's like, yeah, no, you shouldn't care. This is your price. And I'm like, what? And people accept it. So that's crazy, but just go for it, and you'll see. And once you have like a few clients accepting it, I mean, you'll have much more flexibility in terms of the work you can do and stuff like that.
Someone once said to me, you should always charge a price that makes your eyes water.
Yeah.
And that if your eyes water, you're doing it right.
Or makes you laugh.
Yeah, the what is it, the highest amount you can say without laughing out loud? That's the number you need to go in at. I'd also, just to add, I would also say, really similar to what you're saying, is it really depends on what industry and what project, but I really encourage people to move away from thinking about day rates and rather thinking about project fees, because that actually then puts a price on the work you're doing. So then you kind of start with the industry standard, you add your experience on top, and you're charging for that product, that service, rather than your day rate. And you can kind of do this for a number, like the reason to do this is, there are a couple of reasons to do this. The first is it moves away from it being like your day rate and your worth. It is kind of a project that's external to you. It also gives you more flexibility. So often what will happen is a client will come to you with one project, and if you charge them a day rate, then they'll come back to you further down the line with another project, which is a lot more complicated and convoluted, and they'll expect you just to do it for your original day rate, because they kind of think of you as some sort of machine worker who just outputs things, which it's not. If you're in the creative industries, if you're kind of a service provider, or if you're making products, you are a highly skilled worker, and you should be charging for your service. In the same way that if I were to go to a florist, the flowers are not all the same price. It's the same with kind of what you're putting out, what you're kind of making as well. And I think that kind of, you sort of touched on this question about, how do you distinguish between your own personal worth? That I find that to be a really good exercise in doing it.
I think maybe also one thing is for me, it also depends on the clients. So my prices can be different depending on the clients, because depending if I work with a big corporate, I work with a startup, I work with a women group, then maybe I have different prices. So I'll tend to go and ask what is their budget. So I don't know if that's something you're also doing.
Yeah, but bear in mind, when you ask for someone's budget, they're always going to go low. Yeah. And the bigger the company, the lower. So they'll be like, yeah, we don't really have a budget for this. And they definitely do. They just want to come in under budget and go back to their boss and be like, look how little money this is. So bear in mind, when they say that, you can push them. Don't get trapped in thinking, oh, they only have X amount.
I tend to do that when it's something that I have never done before. I can't find that industry rate for, and I'm really kind of, that sort of would be my approach. So that's when I will then I will sort of go to ask them for the budget, almost basically as a last resort. And then from there, you're like, okay, well, if the company's saying that's their budget, then really I need to be asking for 3 times that, or, kind of going from there. But I tend to use that as a last resort. It's also something that when you start out, or if you're really, really uncomfortable with negotiating, it's a way to it's like a soft approach, and it's a way to kind of start getting more comfortable. But honestly, you will find that as the longer you're freelancing, and the more you start to be able to kind of divorce the money from yourself, you just become so much more confident. Like, I was just having this conversation with my partner yesterday where, it's also not just about the rate, it's about the other terms in your contract. So I was having a negotiation about a piece of content that I was writing for a company, and we'd already negotiated the price. And then they came to me with a contract, and in it said they wanted full copyrights. And I've gone back to them and said, no, I'm not giving you that, because that if I sign away my full copyrights, that has a financial implication for me as well. So you just start to you become more confident, and you become able to start having these conversations with your clients. And ultimately, if you are actually, no one reads contracts, and no one ever pulls companies up on contracts. When you do, actually they take you really seriously, because often they don't even know what's in their contract. So it's also not just about the financial, it's not just about the pure money number, it's also kind of about the other elements as well.
And going back to the whole topic of money, it's also trying to be clear about how much you actually want to make in the year, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. And similar to what everyone said, is trying to get that confidence. So, for example, I challenge myself every year, actually I need to make X amount, and then work backwards, and that way, you can negotiate with confidence, you can know when to say yes and when to say no, because sometimes you don't want to obviously settle for less, but at the same time you still want to keep, you still want to be true to yourself with, your standards. So what I would say from a budgeting aspect, try and, this weekend or even after today, just literally think, actually, if I need to make this, what do I need to do backwards? Does it mean that I need to have certain services that people can easily buy online? Or does it mean I need to go all guns blazing and make it very clear that I do projects, and actually, guys, if you book my projects before a certain time you get a discount, then at least half of the year, you've actually got all those projects ticked off. So it's also trying to think about what you want to, achieve by the end of each year, or each, however you plan your years, and then working backward. And that way, you can walk into a room and say, actually, no, I want that price. And if they say no, being confident that something will come. And if you do negotiate, knowing that actually, let me go back to my budget tracker, that means next time I need to work on how I pitch to that client, X, Y, Z. So hopefully that gives you some clarity about what to do in that scenario.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. So, I mean, one way to do it is maybe looking at, what are your goals, long-term goals and stuff. So how much money do you really need? How much money do you need for this year, for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years, for retirement? And then, that's how much I need to get every year. And then once you have this salary, then you budget and you know how much you're paying into for taxes, you're paying into your pension, you're paying into your saving accounts.
So even just to add to that, so probably for myself, it's a different story because I'm in full-time employment, so I have the pension scheme and income protection. But if I ask you guys now, for the freelancers here or people who've literally taken the step as of this week or this year, do you have income protection? So when I say income protection, it's also thinking actually when I do make money, if actually, obviously not trying to be a Debbie Downer, if someone's sick or something happens to someone's involved in an accident, or actually just something is out of your control, how are you protecting your income? And then when it comes to pensions, you need to remember that actually the pensions, you have to actually proactively sort that out yourselves if you're wanting to be a freelancer. So those technicalities come in. I would definitely recommend the UK government website, but things like there's a permanent health insurance, there's an illness insurance as well that covers you. So there are a lot of insurance platforms. I know it probably sounds like the serious topics, but it's trying to make it exciting because you still want to love what you do, but then you have to still be realistic because you still have to protect your money. Because the worst thing is if you don't have the income protection, if you've made all the money from your clients, then you can potentially lose all the money if you're not protecting yourself. So I think that's important to note.
That's super important. And do you have a pension? Private pension? Yeah, so on pension, actually, pensions are a great way to save for the future. So of course the money is going to be locked, everything you save into your pension. But if you are employed somewhere, you have a workplace pension, so everything is taken care of. So you put money in, your employer is topping up your pension, and the government is giving you back the amount you should have paid in taxes. But now, if you're a freelancer, it's your responsibility to save for your future. So you can open a personal pension. A type of personal pension is called the SIP. SIPP, self-invested personal pension. You're going to see it everywhere on all the investment platform with your bank. And basically you can put money in. Ideally you put a direct debit, so every month you start putting money into your pension. And at the end of the year you'll get a tax relief from the government. So that means the taxes you should have paid, you've paid on this amount, you get them back from the government. So unfortunately, you don't have an employer who's very gently going to put money into your pension, but at least you get some money back from the government. So that's almost like free money, to be honest. And this money, what sits in your pension pot, is invested in the financial market, so it should grow over time. And over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it makes actually a huge difference. So it's not like saving into a cash account or a cash ISA. So I would definitely ask you to consider looking into private pensions. It's super important.
Full disclosure, I don't have a pension.
Yeah, which is fine. You should start now. You should start one today.
The pension thing is someone made a point earlier about wearing the different hats when you're a freelancer, and I think the pension, when you're thinking about the pensions, you have to put your boss's hat on. You don't put the employee hat on. You put the boss's hat on, because employers are not giving out pensions out of the goodness of their heart. They're giving out pensions because the government is forcing them to. Unfortunately, the government is not forcing freelancers to put money into pensions, but you almost have to think in that mindset. You have to think, I am the boss, this is really important for my, for the other half of me, which is the employee. There are tax breaks, the government gives you money on top of it. this kind of all, it's basically everything you've kind of basically been saying, which all of this comes back to financial freedom. And financial freedom has absolutely nothing to do with how rich you are. It's to do with it's to do with the relationship you have with your money and how you manage it and how you kind of set yourself up so that maybe at one point in the future you don't have to work for the rest of your life, and you can just remove money as a stressor. It really is true that money does not buy you happiness, but if you have no money, you will be very unhappy. So it's like there is a halfway house between those two, where you like, it doesn't have to be kind of, especially like I'm a journalist, like it's not an industry where I'm going to become a millionaire, but I don't have to become a millionaire to be financially free. And I think like pensions are really play such a key role in that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think this year the government is 25% tax relief. You just need to check on the government for the latest, but from my understanding, I think it's 25%. So if you put £100, you get 25% on top, which is like another £25. So what I would advise you to do for anyone who's transitioning is just sit down and really think about what pensions are actually under your name first. And then there's a service called the Pension Transfer Service. You just have to Google it. And then that will literally, can have a conversation with them. They can't go into details as to what is in each amount, depending on how many employees you've had. But the good thing, they can tell you the names of the pensions. Then strategically look at all the pensions and think actually which one is suited to my lifestyle, where I'm going. Okay, I'm this age. Do I need to really put that much? Or actually I'm at this stage. Let me think about actually putting more. And then when you are going through that phase, I think it's important to have a community of friends as well, because obviously the pension is more personal, but you should be able to have open conversations with your immediate network, because they might know something that you might not know. So I know there's a platform called Pension Bee, they're good as well, and they give you more clarity on actually what pension should I be thinking about. And again, I know obviously everyone has different backgrounds, but it's all dependent on your current situation, because I personally don't know, what background you're coming from. But what I would advise you to do is just set yourself a challenge this week. Really think about what pensions first are under your name. If you've had an employer, just call them just to definitely confirm what's happened after you've left. And if you're on the transitioning process, really figure out, actually, should I move now? Or if I do, okay, which pension am I going to eventually start off with?
Yeah. And with pension, is the more you earn, the bigger the tax relief. So you mentioned 25%, but it actually can be much more than that if you earn more. So it's a really good way to save. And you can start a pension with like £25, £50 a month. So, I mean, you should also go and use like a pension calculator to see, okay, how much will I actually need in retirement? And they will ask you, okay, how much do you have in your pension today? You may have zero. How much do you earn? How much do you think you can save? And that will tell you, okay, there's a shortfall actually in your pension. So if you want to retire on 25K, on 30K, whatever it is, this is how much money you should put into your pension every month. That's quite a scary number, but at least you know. And then you can take your own decision and decide to save somewhere. At the same time, don't lock all your savings into your pension, because you need to live, you need an emergency fund, you need to be able to, go on holidays and pay for like the day-to-day, because your pension is money that's going to be locked until you're 55, so just make sure, there's a right balance in your financial goals.
It's also kind of really like, there's a couple of things also with pensions, is that it ties into this whole issue where historically investing has been an old boys club, and even if you try and look on the Fidelity website, which is where I have my pensions and my investments, it's impossible to make sense of those websites. Luckily, there are now kind of like, there's Pension Bee, there's Wealthify, Wealth Simple, all of these places and apps which have kind of demystified it. Obviously the work that Emilie's doing with Vestpod as well to demystify this, because it's women who are being negatively targeted. There is a gender pension gap when it comes to women, even more so with self-employed women. It's really important to start small and manageable with pensions, because the other thing that we haven't mentioned is compound interest, which is basically interest on interest. So the money in a pension works in a way that no other way that you will save your money will work. So it's not the case that you kind of think, oh, it's okay because I'm going to sort of save loads of money, but keep it in my bank account and then I'll just put it all in a pension later. You may not actually benefit in the same way as if you were just putting a little bit away each month. Sorry, I keep ranting about pensions, but they are like, they almost need like a rebrand, because you kind of think of pension and you think of pensioners and you think like the world might explode and we might not ever get there. You probably will. The chances are much higher that you will end up retiring and that you will need to live. Literally, even if it's just, even if you can just put £10 or £20 a month into a pension, it will literally pay dividends. I will get off my soapbox now.
So just to close on pension, women actually retire on 20% pension savings of men. It's nothing. We retire super poor. We live longer. We earn less. We have kids. So it's quite dark. So please let's work on the statistics. It's quite a big thing. We need more money. We live longer, and we want to be able to have some money when we're on our own for these last years. But I think let's wrap up on on pensions. So now I wanted to talk more about money management and cash. And you talked I think it's very important to talk about being an employer versus being the boss. And I think when you're a freelancer, as you said, you're doing everything. So you're your own employee, so you take the big decisions, but you also do the work. And then you also have your family and stuff, so you have to pay for everything. So how do you manage your finances versus your business finances? So maybe Sapphire, if you want to start and talk about how do you do it practically? Do you work with an accountant? Do you make a budget? Do you pay yourself from your business or your freelance practice? How does it work?
So, full transparency, because I'm always very honest in everything I do. Business finance, nailed it. Personal finance, still working on it. I've never run out of money. I've never had to borrow money, but I don't have a pension. Every time I put money in my savings, it goes. So, for example, when I started my business, although I agree with what everyone says that you should put money aside and you should have a safety net, I didn't have any savings because I started my business while I was living in Thailand and I had blown all my savings backpacking and having a great time. And I didn't get savings have a savings account again until very recently. And then I blew it again because I wanted to move into a nicer flat, so I did. So that's the full honesty of where we're at. In terms of business, that's where my strengths lie. So both of my businesses have been profitable and successful-ish, I guess. And both of those, the money has always flowed, so I've never had problems with cash flow. And that's down to being organised and understanding the money in your business. And I think even if you're a freelancer, you need to look at yourself as a business. You are still a business, you're just a business of one. And it's important to start to get to grips what I think a lot of people are really scared to get their heads around. If you are a freelancer, you're probably not needing to do a profit and loss sheet. You might not need to do a financial forecast, but I actually think a financial forecast would still be entirely useful and probably often ignored as a freelancer. Those are all things you kind of need to get your head around, and they are often, when you go into business, completely foreign, and you'll be like, what the hell is this? And they're often, there's not that many resources, or there definitely weren't when I started, to make that seem approachable. If you were a middle-aged man who comes from a corporate background and understands business terminology, you were fine. If you were someone who didn't and was going into it fresh-faced and not knowing what's going on, it was incredibly difficult to get the business, the money side of a business understood. So I think really spend time throwing yourself into learning about them. There's loads of free resources out there. We have loads of resources on financing. The girls here have loads of resources. Vestpod are doing great things with resources. Really go out there and see what you can find and read it. Don't be scared to sort of throw yourself into learning what these terms mean and to discuss them with people. If you have the conversation with other people about what these things mean, they're going to go straight from your, don't really get what it is. You really move it into actually understanding in a practical way what it means. If you really then can't get your head around it, you can have an accountant. I have an accountant now, but I didn't the first time around, but that's more to do with having a limited company. But I don't, I understand the money, because I think even when you have an accountant, I think people, when you have an accountant, expect your accountant to be like, oh, it looks like you're going to run out of money, or, oh, your business isn't very profitable at the moment. That's not their job. Their job is just to fill in the paperwork and make sure that everything that needs to go to HMRC is done.
If you want someone who does that, you pay a lot of money.
Normally that's going to be outside of your budget in the beginning. So bear in mind it's worth, even if you get an accountant, to at least have a basic understanding and to still be looking at your figures, because I think a lot of people get an accountant and then go, yeah, they'll sort it all out and have no understanding of what's happening. Basically, it's going to be foreign in the beginning. You can learn, and you really should. I think it's one of the most important aspects of running a business. You cannot run a business if you don't understand where your money's going and how you're spending it.
Maybe, Anna, I'll come back to you regarding like getting paid actually from clients, which is like a big issue for freelancers. But maybe, Abiola, can you tell us the difference between being a sole trader or actually setting up a limited company, and what are the best ways to get started? Because, I mean, initially when you start being a freelancer, you have no clue, you just have your current account, you get paid on your current account, so everything gets mixed up, like your money from your freelancing, your expenses, and it's really, really hard to like manage your freelance practice as a business. So practically, what are your different options when you're freelancing?
So it just depends on the type of business you do and where you are at with your business. So the sole trader is you and your business are the entity, so if something happens, you're liable for everything. And then limited is its own separate entity where there's a director, your company can have its own possessions, and you can start to build it. Again, it just depends on your personal preference. I know from my understanding, limited company tends to be the most populous option, but I think it's trying to be honest with your account, like you and your bank account and your business idea, and really think what's realistic. Because if you do decide to become a sole trader, which is actually, I've got my business, let's say I own a small lipstick brand, and I go to the market every weekend and I literally just get everyone to buy my products, and then I have insurance, and then I have small money coming in. Whereas with a limited company, it's thinking more about the bigger picture. You might want your company to actually expand, and that's why I want to, as a mini disclaimer, make sure that everyone's comfortable with what actually good looks like, because someone actually might be comfortable being a sole trader and getting that $1,000 a month, and that's fine for them as long as they do their bookkeeping. Whereas someone who's a limited company is thinking about the bigger picture and thinking, actually, in this case, let's say a company called ABC, actually I want to employ 20 people in the long term, so I have to be thinking from ground up. Again, another top tip I would say is, before you make a decision to really think about which company you want to register, try and do a mini activity for yourself, because I know she mentioned something about the differences between the personal finance and the business finance, and making sure you also master the personal finance. Sometimes it can just be so simple, where you literally just do the 50-30-20 rule. So try and think to yourself, actually, if I become a sole trader, and I still have my personal finance account, or if I become a limited company and I still have my personal finance account, if I times whatever I'm getting by 0.5, that's already 50% that I'm using for my essentials, and then you still times that amount by 0.3, and that should be your 30%, where it's like flexibility to use your wants or your needs. And then with the amount you get in your account a month for your business or your personal account, times that by, again, 0.2, and that gives you flexibility to save and put money into an emergency fund, or any savings. And then that way, that will give you a realistic picture as to what your price points will go into. And then that way you'll feel more confident, actually, if I'm a sole trader or a limited company, I know what my lifestyle preferences or where my business is going, and my personal account, and then now I know what my fixed rates are, and then when the fixed rate comes in, which we'll speak on, how to then continue with that. So those are the main differences between the sole trader and the limited company.
Can I add to that? Yeah. Because I've been a sole trader and I had a limited company. One thing to remember is that you can switch. So you can start as a sole trader, and then when your business actually starts to make money, you can switch to a limited company. So when you are making money, a limited company is great because you will pay less tax overall. You will pay yourself dividends, which is lower on, you get $2,000, I think, tax-free, and then it's a lower tax rate. Something, it used to be like 7%, I'm not sure what it is now. And then you pay corporation tax rather than like personal tax, which used to be a lot lower, but now it's like 17%, so you're not saving as much, but you're still saving money. But being a sole trader is much easier to manage, it's a lot easier to understand. You can do your self-assessment. You just do a self-assessment on HMRC at the end of the year, and it's really easy to do. that's really easy for you to do. When you're a limited company, it gets a bit more complex, and the likelihood is you'll need an accountant. Legally, you can do it without an accountant, but it's really easy to get wrong, so it's worth paying someone to do that for you.
So I'm still a sole trader for various reasons. It's such a personal decision, and one that really the best thing to do if you are a sole trader considering becoming a limited company, if you don't already have an accountant, get an accountant to basically do your books both ways and get them to walk through your personal situation with you, because in most cases, after you reach a certain earnings threshold, becoming a limited company definitely makes tax sense, but it comes with it, exactly as you've described, other stuff that you need to think about. And it also really, really depends on your industry, which is what you touched on. For example, journalists, your biggest risk as a journalist is getting sued for libel and defamation. If that were to happen and you'd published in a traditional media outlet, they would be fronting that cost of that lawsuit anyway. So you're not actually at that much risk as a sole trader working within the journalism industry, and I'm sure it's true for kind of other industries as well. So it really depends on the nature of your business, what your risks are, what your business is. If you work in an industry that kind of deals with sole traders or not. There are some industries where also, because there's this whole, there's the VAT threshold and having to add VAT. Some industries are not going to be happy with you adding VAT on top of your invoice. I think it's such a personal thing that really the best thing you can do is speak to an accountant or a financial advisor, because there's really no one solution fits all, and as you've said, you've kind of gone between the two and you can go back and forth, and there's just so many things to consider that I don't think we wouldn't be able to say yes, definitely all go and be limited companies.
Obviously, although some industries might not be happy with you adding VAT on top, once you're turning over 85 grand, you have, regardless of whether people like you doing it, you legally have to do it.
And that's something you do. You did quite recently.
Yes, so we literally went VAT registered on the 1st of October, which...
Congrats.
Thanks. Trying to look at it as a positive. It's a bit of a ball ache because there's loads more paperwork that goes with that. And
do you have to be VAT registered if you go over 85k as a sole trader as well, or is it just limited company?
I think yes, I'm pretty sure, but I've never gone over 85k as a sole trader. But from what I know, yes. And remember, it's not. This is where some people get caught out. It's turnover, not profit. So any money that's come into your account. It's also on a rolling 12 months, so it's not the financial year. If you turn over 85k in the last 12 months, you have to pay, you have to go VAT registered and you have to start paying that. And you really, really need to be on top of that. And that's why it's sometimes, and sometimes accountants mess this up and people go under because they have gone over 85k, not gone VAT registered, got caught out, and then owe so much tax to HMRC. I've literally seen businesses go under from it. So well worth noting. The other thing I was going to say before we move on, two things actually. One, sometimes when you're looking from a business aspect, people think that to be a reputable business, you need to be limited, and that adds some kind of gravitas. I kind of think that's a bit bullshit. And actually, if sole trader works for you, be a sole trader. Don't do it just for the kudos of being well, I'm a limited company. Lastly, although yes, when you're a limited company, the director isn't liable for lots of things, and the business is its own entity if you go under. One thing to bear in mind is that if you're getting a loan or anything like that, often you're still liable as the director for the loan. A lot of people will go into it and think, oh, well, it's okay because I'm a limited company, so I'm untouchable. If your business, quite often you will have to be the guarantor for that loan if your business isn't making a lot of profit yet, or if you don't have long enough accounts for long enough to show that your business can pay the loan back, then they'll still make you personally liable for that loan. So bear that in mind because that catches people out as well.
Because it goes back to the whole topic of the self-assessment and just seeing what you are, which category you fall under, and it's also trying to just remember, again, just to summarise it, how risky is your business basically, because in this world there are very interesting people, there's the good and the bad, so you always want to be protected. And it's also trying to just enjoy the process as well, because I know probably this sounds quite serious, but it is a fun process. All of us have our platform, so just trying to think, okay, let me just get increase my knowledge with everything I need to know about the nitty-gritty details, and then eventually you start to get to that point where you actually can just do it with your eyes closed. But again, it's trying to remember, if you do get to the point of getting an accountant, usually April will be your favorite time of the year, where you start to really tell the government what you've been doing, especially with the profits you've been making. So try and see if there's any free accounting sessions. We have social media sometimes, some firms. If you want a financial advisor, I know Unbiased is also good, unbiased.co.uk or is it .com, but basically they have a list of financial advisors and other people who are registered in the industry, and that way you can just literally have an introductory call, and when you're ready to start paying money for advisory services, you can go down that route. If you just prefer to have that free call, then at least you know where you stand. But I think it's good to just go to someone who doesn't know you, who's neutral party, and just give you literally black and white details. Because again, similar to what we've all said, every person's preference is different, and just trying to be honest with your situation and just let your business continue to grow.
If you get an accountant as well, make sure you get on with them. I've gone for accountants like flies, because I'm just like, no. Because you are putting a lot of faith in them, and it helps to have an accountant. I can ring my accountant up and be like, Shirley, help me. I think I've done something wrong, or I don't know about this, or should I buy this, or she's so nice, and I feel so comfortable around her with my finances that it makes things feel a lot easier. If your accountant makes you feel uncomfortable and you feel like you can't talk to them about stuff, you're then probably not going to get the most out of them.
I guess the same for financial advisors.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to talk about that because it's super important, is how do you actually get paid? This is a nightmare. So when you're freelancers, I'm now using contracts. I have payment terms and stuff. Companies don't pay me on time. And I have to send 20 emails to get paid. It takes me so much time. Yeah. So how do you do it? How do you make sure, so before you send the invoice, when you talk to the clients, then when you send the invoice, and after that you get paid? Because if you get paid 3 months late, you have lots of expenses going through, and at some point you're running out of cash.
So you thought I got on my soapbox earlier. So there's two things. There's obviously at the very top level, there is a real problem in late payments across all freelance industries. There are various campaigns, mine included. There are some others that are trying to work on this. In the first instance, I highly encourage you to seek those out and support them, because there are kind of structural things that do need to change. Also kind of in sort of go, and then from there, you really need to figure out some ways to try and help yourself. So the things that I kind of do as sort of set in stone rules, I do all of my invoicing 1 day a week. So I dedicate a afternoon every week. It actually only really ends up being about an hour or two for that. And there's a couple of reasons to do this. The first is it puts you on a bit more of a regular schedule. So rather than trying to kind of ad hoc invoice people as your jobs come in and out, you know that all the invoicing happens on, in my case, Monday afternoons. Also, and that in theory should regulate your pay. It never does, because of course the companies just, they don't care. The other big reason to do that is for your own mental health. It is exhausting chasing money. And I like to kind of think of it as Monday afternoon is when I kind of put on my armor and kind of go to battle to get my money. And I don't want to do that randomly. I just want to, it's a dedicated time every week that I do it. Related to kind of the larger picture, really know your rights. So know what the law says about freelancer pay. I can tell you now that there is a law that protects against late payment. If there is no term in the contract, the default payment terms are 30 days. If a company comes to you and says that their payment terms are 45 days, 90 days, 120 days, you can refuse to sign that contract, and you can say, no, I want 30-day payment terms or whatever. Large companies won't really budge, but it's always worth trying. If there is no payment term kind of put forward, the default is 30 days. If your invoice is overdue, regardless of the payment terms, you are entitled to a late payment fee. It's £40 for invoices under it's individual invoices under £999. It's £70 for invoices £1,000 and above, and I think it gets higher for invoices over 10k. On top of that, you can charge interest, and it works out to be about 8% per day for every day that the invoice is. No, it's not 8%. It's like 0. It's quite a small interest amount. I can't remember off the top of my head, but you are entitled to interest. The minute your invoice is overdue, you are allowed to reissue an invoice with the late payment fee. I do this it's literally like the second that my invoice is overdue, I reissue the invoice. I have never had a company pay me the late payment fee. All it does is accelerate them paying me what they already owe. One of the big things in my campaign is trying to do something around actually respecting the late payment fee law. There's 3 asks in my campaign, and one of them is just respect of the late payment fee. It's not something that I've made up. It's a law that already exists, but companies just routinely find a loophole or basically just outright just breaking the law. And so I really recommend that at the bottom of all invoices, you put your payment terms. There is some text that's floating around the internet that has some payment terms. I've actually taken that text to a lawyer and had them look at it and sort of tweak it. I'm happy to I can share that with you to share with the group. But basically what you need to be saying is you essentially need to quote those terms need to say that you will charge a late payment fee, and these are your payment terms. I also had in there a line about failure to meet these terms will potentially result in being reported to the Small Business Commissioner, because the Small Business Commissioner does deal with this. Unfortunately, he just got sacked, so no one it's not really clear what's going to happen with his office. It's a fairly new office. It's only been around for 2 years, and his sole aim was to help work on this project, this problem. I had met with him. He genuinely wanted to help, but then the government sacked him. So don't know what's going to happen there. Great. In each industry probably has a trade union that might be able to help. So the NUJ, the National Union of Journalists, for any fellow journalists out there, they can help you chase late payment fees. And for each industry, if you have a union, they might be able to help. One thing to bear in mind with unions is they go in all guns blazing, and you probably will damage your relationship with the client if you go down the union route. Really, really treat them as a last resort, in my opinion. Otherwise, you're basically left with a small claims court, and that's I'm sort of getting to absolute worst case scenario.
Small claims court's really easy to do though.
It is easy, yeah, it is. And that's the thing, is that many people don't actually realise how easy it is to do. But that it is an option that is available for you. There's also IPSI, the Association for the Professional Self-Employed. They also should be able to help. But what you can basically do, what I really advise is put in the measures at the beginning of the process to avoid you having to go to that extreme.
So spending a bit more time, maybe also
Yes.
drafting your invoice, making sure nothing is missing.
Yeah.
Because very often it's okay, your address is missing,
Exactly.
or your bank account, so don't give
And then
corporate excuses.
Exactly,
to
yeah.
not
Every
pay
time
you.
you make a mistake, which everybody will make at some point,
Yeah.
by the way, something will happen and you'll be like, shit, it wasn't in my terms.
Yeah, add it.
Check
Yeah,
the terms and be like, yeah, no, I didn't, and then tweak it. I used to, my terms get tweaked all the time. Every time something goes wrong, I'm like, how can I legally cover myself?
exactly. And if you don't have, I use free accounting software. It's called Wave. I love it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, only because they recently have pulled out of their sort of European presence, so they're not compliant with Make Tax Digital, blah, blah. It might be more of a headache to use them. But the point is, if you have invoicing software, or if you have an invoice template, it just makes everything so much easier. So all of your terms are already in there by default. Every time a company is like, oh, you need to provide your uncle's cat's microchip number, or whatever kind of nonsense they want out of you, just keep adding that to the bottom of your invoice. So my invoice, it has obviously my address and the fee and everything, and my bank account details, but it also has my IBAN number, my SWIFT code, my national insurance number, my unique tax reference number. Every time a company has asked for another piece of information, it just stick it on the bottom of the invoice. Also ask the companies to confirm that everything is correct with your invoice upon sending it. And also, this is a really, really important thing that I think not enough people do. Don't just chase the money when you need it. Chase it when it's overdue. Because what you will find yourself in the situation where 1 month everyone will be paying you late, and then suddenly your rent will be due and there just won't be enough money in your bank account, but you're owed thousands of pounds. So that's kind of also why I do that system of doing it once a week. Once something has gone overdue, that money is owed to you. And again, sort of try really hard to divorce yourself from this business situation you have to deal with. Don't be scared to chase the money. Usually it's a large company screwing you over. Don't be scared about burning bridges. Be polite in your email, but be firm. And also, if you are chasing the money when it's due rather than when you need it, that automatically makes you a lot less emotional and makes you a lot less panicked. And when you do kind of have to start pulling out the big guns, you feel more able to do that. And hopefully you're sort of trying to prevent that situation from happening.
Can I play devil's advocate? I don't think you'll like this, Anna. To demystify this, being that I am starting to get into the realms of big business and running a large company, the reason that, well, there are odd businesses that do this because they don't respect you, but the majority of companies don't pay you on time because of cash flow issues.
Yeah.
And
that's
cash,
all of them.
Yeah, that's cash is king. And once you get to a certain size of a business, your cash flow is, you're making money, but the cash flow isn't there. So the money to pay all of the bills that you need to pay, the money will come in theory, but it's not there yet, and they don't necessarily have the money they're supposed to have to pay you. And what we think when we're small people in comparison to big businesses, we automatically think, oh, well, they're making millions, so the money's definitely sat there, they just don't want to give it to me, when in reality, they can't, and the money's not there, and they're never going to, you're never going to have a big business like Arcadia saying, yeah, we haven't actually got enough money in our account, because they're never going to say that. And secondly, because cash is king, and ultimately, the longer any business, this isn't how I do it, but there is reasons for this, the longer anybody holds off on payments, and the reasons why all big businesses hold off for as long as they possibly can to pay you or pay anybody, is because it makes their books look better. And when you're a big company and you've got investors or you want investment, you need as much money in the bank for as long as possible so that on all of your financial sheets, you look really good on paper. And that's why so many do it. And I actually think in terms of changing things, although yes, we need to come at it at the angle that we need to get businesses looking and respecting freelancers and wanting to pay them on time, I actually think to cure it, you need to come at it from the total opposite side with the same aim, but come about working out how businesses can better understand cash flow and predict this in the first place. If you could help all these big companies solve their cash flow issues, they would pay their freelancers on time.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, the majority of companies that are paying late is because it's for cash flow, and 50,000 small businesses go out of business every year because of cash flow issues related to late payment. But what your point is, like, definitely highlights is the need for why change has to happen at the macro level. That this is not something that, like, us as individual freelancers can fix, and it's something that goes back to your earlier point about if you understand business, you have a better grasp on this. But the problem is that individual freelancers are acting as creditors to these large businesses. So if your invoices are going overdue and not paid, and that company goes out of business, which can happen and does happen, particularly if you work in precarious industries like journalism. The Pool, a women's publication that probably many of you all read, went out of business at the beginning of this year, and it left freelancers out of pocket tens of thousands of pounds each, because they are individual creditors. So there are things that I think you need to do to protect yourself, whilst kind of supporting any initiatives or any campaigns that will try to bring change at the top level. And this is the reason why the thing with the Small Business Commissioner, it really is such a shame, because all of these issues, the Federation of Small Business, IPSI, Small Business Commissioner, the cash flow and sort of the interaction between small businesses and large businesses is what they were all working on. So this is obviously kind of like a small cog in a larger broken system. But I really don't believe in kind of throwing your hands up and being like, oh, well, nothing, like, this is just the way it is. Like, I just have an allergy to that sort of attitude. And if you can just do something to maybe help at least one of your invoices get paid faster, I think you should do it.
To be fair, like, to confirm, I'm not saying that, like, obviously I think that's the way it should be done. But I do think if you understand why big businesses are doing this, it takes the emotion out of it.
Yes.
So you don't have to sit there at home and think, like really upset, thinking, oh my God, they're not paying me because they don't care about my work and they're ignoring my emails and like, feeling really personally wounded by that. You are like irrelevant to that situation. You are just numbers and money that they owe, and there are you times thousands, and they're just like, oh my God, you know, we need to pay this. And I think that makes you feel firmer and stronger doing the things you've said. So saying, chasing the money, threatening to take to small claims, getting in touch with people, you know, knowing your rights and chasing them. It feels so much better if you know that this isn't like a personal vendetta and it's nothing to do with how well you did or didn't do the job.
Yeah. And just to add to that, 2 quick tips if you literally haven't got any clients at all and just literally starting. The power of emails, just make sure you protect yourself via email. And the main reason why I say this is if it gets to the extent where you're being ignored, you've chased multiple times, still no feedback, that's your protection. Because I think people forget how powerful emails can be. The second thing is with regards to resources. I know probably sometimes there's a perception that probably invoices sound quite technical. You can literally go online and get a template and literally just adjust it so that when you have your first client, you literally just use that as an opportunity to, you know, get used to it. And similar to what everyone said, if you experience challenges, you start to tweak the content. And I guess the third thing is people are people. Try and have a conversation before the actual project is due or before the payment happens, because for myself, if I speak to someone, sometimes I feel like a quick call just to remind them about the expectations as well, and that's when you still put your boss cap on, because one thing you don't want to fall under is, you know, say like, you know, I order from you and then no one responds, then I still give you your order, but I haven't even had a verbal conversation with you. So try and use the human element, and, you know, depending on your personality type, use that as well to your advantage, because, you know, if someone's in the office and they know actually person A needs to get paid, they will literally be the person who's pushing for you to get paid on time. So also use that as your advantage as well.
Yeah, and to add to what you've said, verbal is good, but as you said, whenever you have a phone call with someone, always email them straight after and say, to recap or to confirm, here is what we discussed, because
I've had this.
Yeah, when you have to take it to court, if it all happens on the phone, it becomes very much he said, she said.
Yeah.
And if you can't prove that they said that to you, they might have said, oh my God, we'll totally get you to pay for you this week. Like, don't even stress, I promise. And then if you've got no proof that they've said that, it's really hard to do anything. That's, you know, it's basically they might as well not have that.
Yeah, because in our generation, I know it's very quick to send a DM or use WhatsApp or text, but always reel it back to, okay, it was good to have a chat, I'm going to now email you, because one thing you don't want to do is just have everything on your phone or Instagram, because you know what's going to happen to Instagram, your WhatsApp might not work. So when you need that evidence, or when you just need to track any patterns you see with invoice problems, then at least you can then record it and start to think about how to start, you know, strengthening your invoice to other potential clients.
Great, thank you. We covered so much, but I still want to take questions. So if you need to go, you can go now. But maybe we take like 3 questions.